sitting down with me today. This is such an honor, truly, to have you here. You have such deep expertise in this field, and I'm tickled. So thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure, really. It always is, yeah.
I came across you, well, because I'm a little neurotic and I'm always searching for new, interesting things. But I had C. Sykes
Oh,
on
yeah,
talking about internal family
yeah.
systems. And so then I follow up with people and I came to you and I was like, oh my goodness, how have I not had you on the podcast yet?
Wonderful.
Because you do something a little different than what is
Hmm.
sort of mainstream addiction treatment, which I'm always looking for. And you're the creator of the Felt Sense Polyvagal Model, which is a mouthful and I'm sure scares some people
We just
off.
call it FSPM
So
for short.
okay, FSPM.
Yeah,
That's great. I like a good
yeah.
acronym. I used to work at Microsoft and we had like a
Yes,
million
yes.
acronyms,
Well,
so I'm
the
very
psychotherapy
comfortable with
field does
those.
too. IFS,
Yes.
DBT, CBT. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And your very famous book is Treating Trauma and Addiction with the Felt Sense Polyvagal Model, a bottom-up approach, which I want to ask you about. But then you have a new book out, 20 embodied practices for healing trauma and addiction. And when I hear that, I am like in, like, get me on the phone with this person. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this. I think it's helpful to have
Mm,
some context for how somebody comes into what they're
mm,
doing. And then we're going to talk about all this good
yeah.
stuff.
That is an important question, I think. Um,
Yeah.
and, I could answer it in many different ways, depending on where I start in my life journey.
Right,
With,
right.
family members who struggled with trauma responses and addiction. Um, and then when I was just getting out, I just got out of grad school. The first job I got was in a hospital setting, a psychiatric ward, in a hospital just north of Toronto here in a really difficult area, like lots of families with multiple needs. And it was very unusual, but in this program, this psychiatric ward, they had a group for incest survivors.
Wow.
And the psychiatrist in charge,
This is your first
yes,
job in the
this is
field.
my
Oh my
first job in
goodness.
the field.
Nothing like jumping into the fire.
And so they wanted me to run this group, and oh my goodness. But everything I've done and developed has come from my experience with those young women. Everything. And every time I talk, pretty well, I start with them because they really taught me the basis of what I use now as a kind of marker, grounding, yardstick, orienting kind of principle for how I'm understanding the world of trauma and addiction. And it all came from a really, right away, a depathologizing approach because I already was kind of like that anyway. I was a hippie and I was challenging the norms. And my mom was a feminist. And so I really had awareness around misogyny. And I got into this hospital setting and I could not believe the way these women were being treated. It was shocking. And when Judith Herman's book came out, Trauma and Recovery, in the 90s, she actually said in that book that these women are treated with contempt. And if your listeners haven't read her book, I mean, honestly, the word iconic is used so often now, but just an amazing woman, really. A psychiatrist she was part of the Boston group with Bessel van der Kolk, and when I read that and she said that, I thought, wow, I'm not crazy. This is exactly what I'm seeing as all these young women who were victims of crime
Yeah.
were being labeled as having borderline personality disorder and then basically just shoved off to the side. It was like, you deal with them because we don't want to. And the good thing about that is that I was left to create my own space. Nobody looking over my shoulder The bad thing was that back then, 45 years ago, I mean, we didn't have proper good supervision. We didn't really talk about vicarious trauma. So we were really, we were really struggling. But I used my own experience as a client. I was lucky in my adolescence, really struggling with a lot of anxiety and panic. I found this amazing therapist. And I used what I learned from him to really be able to just listen to what these young women were telling me and showing me through their bodies, through their self-harming behaviors that became addictive because they worked. But how did they work? It was like, how is cutting your body helping you? How do we make sense out of that? Because in the traditional model, it was like they were masochistic, they were attention-seeking, blah, 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 blah. But when I helped them to track what was happening for them, like, well, what happens before you repeat some kind of a behavior that is soothing but also harmful, like cutting the body or binging and purging or drinking lots of alcohol or doing lots of drugs or engaging in unsafe sex, all of those behaviors, right? Even things like sucking on bars of soap. What was that?
Wow.
Well, now I understand it. But what they were aware of was that before the behavior, as we slowed it down, they were in acute stress, which now we would understand as a flight-fight state in the nervous system, in our autonomic nervous system. Everybody knows, that flight-fight place in the body. And something about the behavior, so then we tracked, well, what happens after you do this thing, is that they would often go to sleep or just numb out. And we would trace it to dissociating, as we would call it now. And so it made sense that if they engaged in something that hurt them, they were also on some level receiving help by numbing the body.
Right.
And that became the thing that I started to really track over time. And then I just found different people who I learned things from. The felt sense part of that was through Eugene Gendlin, who is a brilliant philosopher and psychologist who created an embodied practice called focusing and felt sensing. So it was a way that I learned to help people slowly come into their bodies. Because in trauma, and with these young women, it's very unsafe to go into the body, right? The body hurts you because it's been hurt. It's hard to be in there. And the protective feature of the body through the autonomic nervous system is to dissociate, to get out of there. Because it's...
That makes sense.
It's just too overwhelming. So first it was Gendlin's work with felt sensing, and then I found other things, and also, of course, polyvagal theory, which is a huge influencer now in what's happening in the trauma world. And I'm trying to make it a big influencer in the addiction world.
Yes, because we don't hear about this a lot, especially in adolescent and young adult treatment. I don't want to get sidetracked there because I have so many questions I want to ask you. Let me come back to that. We're going to come back to the adolescent and all of that. But you said something interesting about when you were working with these young women that you noticed in their body. And I'm just curious because, people listening are parents. They're usually with their kids, either living in the home or they see them frequently. And I wonder if you could share what
I saw.
you saw. Like how,
What I saw were bodies that were held in either very constricted flight-fight ways, right? Tension, a lot of tension, hyper-awareness, hyper-arousal, hypersensitivity, exploding, or terror with a lot of panic and anxiety. The body's attempt to try to mobilize and deal with overwhelming feelings inside. And so the body will go through the nervous system into flight, fight first, to try to manage and get into safety. And if that, so that looks like this, that rabbit in the headlights, and raging, or just crazy kind of acting out, and just big feelings, that are really hard to contain. And in adolescence, that can often look like, anger, a lot of anger and rebelling and that kind of thing. Or
Right. And that's what we call it. That's what we call it. Oh, she's so rebellious, or oh, he's so angry, and we stop there, right? We just identify
we label
what
it like
the
that and
outward
say
behavior.
it's a problem. The rebelling behavior is a problem, and it's a defense. But what it's showing us is a nervous system that feels really unsafe. Addictions don't occur when we feel safe. Who's happy and safe and addicted? You don't see that. So what we understand then is that addictions occur when a body is in a state of threat. Now, there's lots of reasons for that. Reasons that have nothing to do with parents. These days.
Please say that again.
Reasons that often have nothing to do with good, loving parents who are really struggling with a global trauma epidemic and with global addictions. We were just talking before we started the podcast about, I'm in Toronto, and I just heard on the radio this morning that parents have started this group called Canada Unplugged for their children who are between the ages of, up until, I think, 14, they said. So they're trying to help kids to stay out of that whole world with smartphones until they're at least 15. And they're doing it through linking together so that they can support each other. So, yes, of course, addiction happens with trauma. Of course it does. And there are absolutely folks that are really struggling with their own, as parents, with addiction. And yes, that will create a dysregulated household and put the kids at risk. And that also isn't about blaming parents. It's a cycle of trauma that lives on in our bodies. And so then that's the one state in the body. If the body can't find safety through flighting, through getting out of there, or through attacking, through fighting, the next place the body goes in the nervous system, and this is polyvagal theory, this is Steve Porges' work, is into a shutdown state that we used to call numbing, that we now know is a dissociated state in the nervous system of collapse. And that is a state that looks like this. Head down, shaming, feeling bad, feeling sad, and it's a state of immobilization in the body. You can't get the kid out of bed in the morning. I went through this with one of my kids. You're just at your wit's end. You can't mobilize them. What's wrong? What's going on? You've lost connection. There's no real, what we call in polyvagal theory, social engagement. Because social engagement is held in the body through the face, right? Like we smile at each other, we give cues of safety. When we're shut down, we don't feel safe, we feel threat. And so we're not connected to each other. And that's why, particularly in addiction treatment, it's absolutely essential that people get themselves into groups where they can connect with each other and what we call co-regulate in that nervous system.
I know you mentioned borderline personality disorder. I know that's one that for parents is so confusing and difficult. And what are you saying, that sometimes just the natural response to this trauma can look like that, or does that develop from the trauma? I'm just trying to sort
Yeah.
of tease out what might look like something versus what is
Yeah.
something, if that makes
Well,
sense.
we would say through a polyvagal or a nervous system perspective, it's not really either. So I actually wrote about
Mm.
borderline personality in my second book. We call it adaptations. So when you understand something through the autonomic nervous system, that's the part of the body that is concerned with our safety and survival. And those nervous system states, they're unconscious, right? We don't think, oh, everything's fine, I feel good, and then there's a loud noise and we jump. We don't consciously think, oh,
Right.
I better jump. That flight fight
Right.
response is unconscious. So all of those responses are unconscious. So this
Mm.
becomes the way that we understand behavior, not through the diagnostic and statistical manual, the pathologizing disordered model. No, I never bought that. I never bought that model. I don't think it's helpful. And when I worked in the system, I mean, it was silly. Like, you'd get charts of these women that were in my group. They were all diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which basically meant,
Mm.
ew, who wants to treat them? They're impossible.
Yeah.
They're manipulative.
Yeah.
They're just acting out and trying to make your life terrible. But what I was exposed to back then, which was a radical paradigm shift, was through the feminist therapy network. And it was women like Sandra Butler who said things like, when a young person is coming to you and behaving in these ways that we're diagnosing as borderline, all they're doing is showing you what they learned to do to survive.
Mm.
Now, again, that
So
doesn't
powerful.
mean it's parents' fault. It
Right.
means that that particular person has a nervous system that is struggling to feel safe in an environment for many, many different reasons. And a lot of those
Right.
reasons these days have to do with the culture that we're living in, especially for
I was going to
teens,
ask you
right?
about that.
I mean,
Yeah.
look at the
Yeah.
culture they're living in. The exposure to social media that, we say it's a problem, but it's a serious problem.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, because you've been doing this for a long time, the differences that you've seen. Because as a parent, I think we often hear trauma and we think, quote unquote, big T
Right.
trauma. We think, like you said, incest,
Yes,
sexual
yes.
abuse, things
Yeah.
like that, that are terrifying to think about as a parent. And there's a lot of blame and shame in that if that has happened. And at the same time, I know that that's not always true. So I'm wondering what you have seen over the course of your career that has changed. And you mentioned social media,
Yeah.
obviously, but what are you seeing when you're talking with people and working with people?
One of the things that I think is really clear is a kind of, the world is in a different place than we've ever probably seen it because of climate change, because of global trauma that's happening and that we're exposed to and we know about all around the world. And this is carried in all of our bodies. There's wars all over the world we're constantly exposed to all the time. And then with COVID, of course, this was a huge thing for all of us in the world. And it brings up issues around social systems of oppression, BIPOC populations, trans, young people that are exposed to so much now in terms of trying to figure out their sexuality. Part of that is a beautiful thing that we're opening paradigms and saying, well, let's look at this in different ways. There's also, much more awareness now around neurodiversity. ADD is a huge area that often is present in addictive behaviors. So some of this is good because it's coming to the surface. But there's so much kind of a sense of lack of really settling and feeling safe in the body. We have a global situation that is not safe.
And our kids are seeing it play out in real time on their phone,
Yeah.
3 inches from their face.
Yes. And I don't know, I mean, in large cities anyway, like in Toronto, it's impossible to do what we did, which is to, buy a house and feed your family. It's just economically, culturally, it's such a challenging world. And in terms of also climate change is really like at the core of what we're fires, floods, all of that is carried in our bodies. And then the demands of parents for women, how do we fulfill our own goals as mothers? Like, I would never have just wanted to have kids. I think it's wonderful if that's what you do. It's remarkable. It's amazing. We need to be able to have folks who really commit themselves to that's their meaning in life. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But for me, I had books in me.
Yes.
And so trying to figure that all out. What's happening in your relationship? Are there addictive processes going on in your relationship? What's happening in your capacity for intimacy and connection with each other as moms and dads? What's happening in terms of how we even organize the family? Families now are like, there's so many different options for families. So it's a very challenging time in terms of everything's kind of up for grabs. Paradigms are shifting. And at the same time, there's also a lot of rigidity in the addiction world around what's the proper kind of treatment, like we were discussing the 12-step programs and the brain disease model, which really is not the only pathway. And yet there's so little that's available to kids and to parents that is something other than that.
Yes, I would love to tap into that a little bit because I do, kind of scanning the environment of adolescent and young adult treatment. Specifically, I would say treatment for people, up until the late 20s. It seems to be very abstinence
Yes, it is.
based.
Yeah.
And obviously, nobody wants a young person to put substances on their brain, clearly. But I wonder if what you're talking about lends itself a little bit more to a harm reduction model versus an abstinence model. And how does this play into the whole treatment world, therapeutic world, all of that, all of the questions about that?
So we have in the Felt Sense Polyvagal Model, we work with graphics, pictures that people can see and map out where they are in the nervous system. And also we work with what we call the 4-circle harm reduction practice. So this is a way, it's like a roadmap. And it's very much based on harm reduction because in our model, we're working with the nervous system. We're working with helping people find ways to regulate and ground this, particularly the ventral branch of the nervous system. So that's the part of the body that is the ventral branch is connected above the diaphragm and then up into the face. This is the part of the body that's engaged when we feel safe. So we know that in states of addiction, we're not feeling safe. And so then we're in these cycles of what we call the trauma feedback loop between flight, fight, and then doing whatever you're going to do to try to survive, and then shutting down, and then back again. So we see addictions as what we call state regulation strategies to help you be able to manage either being too shut down and immobilized or too overwhelmed. That's how we understand them. That's the core of the model. And so it's very helpful because when we bring in, there's a lot to say, neuroplasticity. So this is a new way of understanding how brains develop. And it happened in the 1990s. So the 12-step program and the brain disease model happened before that.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to do is to awaken people to bring in neuroplasticity into our understanding, because now when we understand that brains are plastic and then they keep developing new pathways, we can say, okay, if we can help people find specific behaviors that they can do that activate this ventral branch of the vagus nerve, where we feel safe in our bodies and grounded, then folks are not going to need to engage in addictive behaviors. But we do that through a harm reduction model. We go slowly over time, and we teach people what are these ways? So some of those ways are things like meditation, mindfulness practices, breath practices, drumming, chanting, practices that other cultures that live more in their bodies, singing together, have known forever. But in our white, top-down Western culture, we've cut off from the body. So then we don't understand how bodies actually work and what we need to do to heal. So we're bringing the body back in. We're saying there's specific things that we can do. So at the Polyvagal Institute, we have a gathering coming up at the end of October, and it's all about the vagus nerve. It's all about what are the things we can do to activate this vagus nerve. And one of those things we're doing right now, because you and I think, have established a sense of enough safety together that we can co-regulate our nervous systems, feel comfortable to connect with each other. That's all part of activating the ventral vagus. So when people ask me, how do you keep going and getting up every day and writing these books when I'm not like in my 30s anymore? Like, because it feels good. It activates my ventral vagus. I feel connected to other people. I feel a sense of meaning in the work that I'm doing. These are all things that connect us with that social engagement system. So when our teen is sitting at the dinner table like this, we want to do something. What can we do to make a connection? It's not going to be about disciplining.
Right.
It's going to be about, doesn't matter whatever's going on, at some point in the day, you've got to put whatever that is aside and try to make a connection. And how do you make that connection with your kid, you know? My son would like it. It would be okay with him if I would just touch him a little bit. Sometimes we would put music on in the kitchen and dance. So it didn't matter if he was being a little schmuck other places. If we could find this place where we could be together for a part of the day or the week or the month and find that energy again of connecting and loving or even liking and being together.
Yeah.
So other ways are of course being connected to your friends, to your peer group, and that's a big problem in addiction, because what do you do with your peer group? If you're in addiction, you're doing the thing you're addicted to with your peer group. Big problem, right? So that's why these safe houses and whatever are great ideas in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying that I think the 12-step program is bad. I'm actually really doing a lot of work right now with a wonderful group I wanted to tell your listeners about, called Friendly Circle Berlin, with Patrick McTeer, where 12-step, there's a lot of folks in there that are in 12-step programs or have been in 12-step programs. And I see the wonders of that in terms of the way they're able to co-regulate with each other. But in this particular group, Friendly Circle Berlin, they're really curious about new ways of understanding. And so they're really loving reading my book and C. Sykes' book and understanding, how do we bring in these new kinds of knowledge about healing and not cut ourselves off from that, but be open. And then how does that work as a parent and how we can reach out with our kids? So maybe it's helping your daughter to expose her to something. Well, and as I heard on the radio today, it's like, do something active so that you're not sitting on your phone. You know, go take dance lessons or, and if you can do it together, that's even better.
Even better. Yeah, what I'm wondering too is, at least I know with my son, I did get to a point where I was just so frustrated at not being able to understand why he was doing the things that he was doing. And I would ask him, what are you trying to numb out? What are you trying to, what is this doing? And either he didn't know and couldn't articulate it, or he wouldn't. And I know a lot of kids, I heard a statistic the other day that I don't know if it's true, but somebody said that the average age that a person reveals childhood sexual abuse is like 52, which is horrifying that somebody would carry that with them for more than half of their life. So what could a parent do if somebody's listening and they're like, yes, 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 this makes so much sense, right? I get it. I know my kid's been through some stuff, but their child is very resistant, right? Very shut down, I don't want to talk about this, either because maybe I don't really understand what has happened to me, or maybe I can't, I'm still in shutdown mode. I can't talk about it. As a parent, I guess I would love to hear, like, what should we be doing and what should we not be doing to try and help, maybe soften some of that a little bit, and to even be able to offer some help that doesn't sound like you're going to detox or you're going to rehab, right? Because that doesn't sound appealing to anybody, I don't think. But some of the work that you're talking about does sound a little bit more appealing, like breath work and drumming and some meditation and stuff like that. So I guess help parents get an idea of what can we be doing if we recognize, if this is like sending off all kinds of signals in somebody's head and they don't really know what to do with it.
Well, a couple of things. So one thing is to be more aware of what's going on in your own body as a parent, because it's so easy to just get to a place where we're stuck in flight fight. We're either trying to just avoid it, or we're just so angry and frustrated, right? And that's a problem. So it's finding some help for you to be able to get through blame and shame and find some level of safety in your own body, because that impacts how you're relating to your kid enormously. It's the most important thing, is what state you're in your body. You come to your child in anger, they're going to feel it, because they're going to tense and feel how you are. And if you come to them in desperation and helplessness, which I mean, to understand both of those things, but it's not going to help your kid, because your kid actually is needing your guidance, not your helplessness and frustration. And that's why it's so hard, because we're just human too, and we love our kids and we feel bad when they're not okay. And how are we going to be okay when they're not okay? But we have to find a way to do that, which means finding some different kind of help for you that is more based in your body and your nervous system. I really believe this is key. So come and find me at janwinhall.com. We're starting groups through my institute in the wintertime, and we're offering free things through Friendly Circle Berlin, Somatic Mondays, where we're going through.
Hey, I love a Somatic Monday.
We're going through my book, 20 Embodied Practices. So come and find us. And then the other part of it is, if you can find a place in you that can settle enough a little bit to be able to engage and to really try to listen. And I know that is so hard, because when kids are shut down, and they're shut down in adolescence anyway, because they're trying to figure out stuff without us. So it's a double whammy. It's a very hard time. But adolescence is also an amazing time, because, and we don't want to forget this. We want to come together and remember the great thing about your kid. Remember What did you know that your kid was good at or loved or liked? Find that again. Help them find it. Help them find it. So it's not an easy answer, but it is really about finding something in you that helps you to settle in yourself so that you can approach your kid without shame and blame and bring in some joy and hope. I mean, we have to feel hope for our children, even when we don't. So sometimes we have to borrow hope. So come and be with us.
Love that.
Borrow my hope. Borrow our hope from the group. You know, Friendly Circle Berlin has like 300 people show up live to these things. They're a tight group, man. And they are, Patrick McTeer is amazing. And they've got all the good things about 12-step. And there are lots of good things. And they've got all the good things about what's also there. Curiosity, how to be in your body, how to find hope again, how to settle in and slowly, because it's so easy to get locked into everything becomes negative. You're just so pissed off or hopeless about your kid, or you're flying back and forth between both like they are, that you're all locked in a trauma feedback loop in your family. And you need some fresh energy coming in there from outside. So find your people. And it might be a good therapist. It might, you know, but lots of times parents have tried that, right? And the therapist then, because, you know, a lot of people don't want to do addiction work. It's hard. And it's really hard when you use the disease model, because then you just get into a power struggle. Well, did you use this week? How did this week go? And then they're kind of like checking off the list. We don't do any of that. We say, what happened this week? Oh, you struggled. You kind of fell down there. Well, what was going on before that? And what did you feel in your body? And remember that place in your body that you can start to find where you feel safe? You know, the harm reduction model, when you work somatically, when you work in the body, you don't work in a just sobriety model. So choosing sobriety is part of harm reduction.
Right. I think
they
people
don't
forget
understand that.
I think people forget that. I hear that a lot. Yeah. Well, then you're just encouraging them to keep using.
No, it's not no. Some people would come to me and they're absolutely clear. I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm not doing it anymore. Okay, but then we got to build what you are doing. What are you going to do if you're not doing that? And those are the things that activate this ventral branch of the vagus where the body feels safe and doesn't need addictions. And so those can be things like playing the piano. That's one for my son. He could come into the house, you could feel the dysregulation. He'd sit down at the piano, and 10 minutes later, there he was. He emerged.
Wow. Yes,
and then would be the time to say, what are you doing? You know, not when he comes through the door and I'm upset and he's upset. So looking for the times, looking for the things you can do, make them their favorite food. Even if you're so upset with them. You know, would he come and see us? What do you want for dinner? Food is love. If it comes from a family where food is love. Food can also be really
Food could be a problem too, but I get what you mean. I get what you mean for sure. One thing that I had read, I think on your website or in one of your videos, was that you talked about how we often refer to the substance use as a maladaptive coping mechanism. And you had a different perspective on that I'm hoping that you'll share, because I think it explains a lot.
So addictions are adaptive processes, adaptive behaviors in maladaptive environments. So that doesn't mean we're blaming parents. It means that addictive behaviors are what happens in the nervous system. The nervous system goes up into threat because people don't feel safe. Why don't they feel safe? Well, let's find out. Maybe it's because your kid has ADD and nobody understands them and is shaming the heck out of them at school or at home too. Maybe it's because I used to see a lot of kids like this that were teens that came from really loving, beautiful families, but with folks who could not relate to their kid. They were really more conventional kinds of people, and they had a kid that was like, they had two kids that were like them, and then they had this kid that was like, where
It's like,
little
where'd you
person
come from?
And they loved them, but they didn't understand them. And so that child would be so confused. It's like, I have everything. My mom and dad love me.
Yeah.
I'm even, it might be like that we have money, we can go places, we can do, what is wrong with me? My brother and sister, they're fine. Well, mom and dad might need some help in really listening to who is that kid. How do they tick? They don't function in the same way. Maybe they have a kind of beautiful neurodiverse brain that isn't going to be a doctor or a lawyer.
Right.
And I did a lot of that work, and I really enjoyed it because it was so gratifying when parents could open and just realize that they weren't giving their child what the child needed, that particular child needed to be understood and seen. Because that's what we do as parents, right? We help children develop a sense of who they are, not who we want them to be, or even who we understand them to be, but who they are.
Right.
Oh, you like that? Oh, tell me about that more.
Yeah.
So being curious and open and listening what we call freshly, without all these disorder words and rebellious words and defensive words, just really trying to listen. What's going on for you?
Yeah. I think we tend to listen to our kids through the lens of a diagnosis.
Oh, yeah, that's deadly.
Which, yes, because it's like, okay, I'm hearing what you're saying, but am I really hearing it? Or is this
Yeah, and then we're
diagnosis or
scared,
that
right?
diagnosis?
Oh my God, are you schizophrenic? Or, oh my, you've got that borderline personality disorder thing that nobody wants to treat. And I read about it and it's so hard to treat. Please, just put all of that aside. Not that it's all garbage or anything. I mean, there are patterns of behavior. There are folks that suffer with psychotic episodes. That's all true. But the most important thing in the beginning is just to try to listen without those filters and to notice what's happening. Does your child feel safe? Where do they feel safe? How do they not feel safe? And they might tell you if you ask. I feel safe at home with you and Dad. I don't feel safe at school.
School seems to be a big, big trigger problem, whatever you want to call it. So many of our kids have the classic quote unquote school refusal. My kid will not go to school. And I am by no means a therapist, an expert, anything, but just the human in me says, well, what is it at school that is not
of
safe?
Course, that's the
not
question.
Feeling right.
Yeah. And
there's a lot going on there. That's all I know.
Yeah, and it's again not blaming. It's that there's so much being demanded now as educators. And in our work now with my facilitators, we have educators that are learning about the nervous system and saying, you know what, the first and most important thing in medicine, in healthcare, in education, in whatever we do, business, is that people come together and they feel safe enough to be together so that they can listen to each other without going into states of threat, into flight, fight, which is what the world is doing. We're in those states.
Right.
So we're very concerned about that. It's like we have to make safety the most important thing. Safety is the bedrock. Safety is the North Star.
Yeah.
And so we need to
both outside,
feel enough of the outside and inside.
Yeah, outside and inside, because I think sometimes as parents we assume that inside, meaning like in the home, at home with parents, well, of course that would feel safe. And maybe it doesn't. And that's a hard thing. I just recorded a podcast yesterday about how it can be really difficult as a parent to accept that maybe your kid doesn't feel
Yeah.
safe at home for some
Yeah.
reason. And that's very, very difficult, which is why we always recommend that parents have their own therapist
Yeah.
so that while they're trying to help their child, that they are getting the help that they need, because this brings up all the gunk from the past. It's going to open old wounds as you start to go through this with your child. If you really want to understand what's going on with them, you really have to understand what's going on with
Yes.
you.
Yes.
And that might be very
Yeah. That's
uncomfortable.
the co-regulation part. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
tough because the two choices either seem to be, $100,000 US a month to go to a luxury hotel with a little addiction treatment thrown in on the side.
Yes.
Honestly,
Yes.
just unbelievable. Or, the sort of stereotype drinking coffee in styrofoam cups in a church basement with a 12-step, which of course isn't going to appeal to adolescents. But of course there are different groups, and there are some groups that
Yeah.
are, doing a much better job in terms of appealing to young people. But I think people have to find what is going to work for you. My message is we need to get into our bodies, and we need to understand the nervous system, because it's the key to understanding how your system is regulating your state, and those behaviors become addictive because you walk down them over and over and over again. They literally build these pathways in the brain, and so they're hard to change, but we can change them with these daily practices. Yeah.
Yeah. And do adolescents respond faster than adults? What I'm just thinking is they're younger, obviously. Maybe they have a trauma, but they don't have 20 additional years of re-traumatization. So it
Yeah,
seems to
it's a time
me
to catch
that
them.
maybe they could respond
Yes, and also the
faster.
neural pathways haven't, developed into that real stuck place in the same way they would 30 years down the road. Part of the problem,
Right.
when I would see a lot of people that, were in their 40s and 50s, and, they've already had like 20 parents,
Oh,
20, 30
yeah.
years of addictive behaviors that you then have to, when you kind of come back into the world again, you have to deal with the wreckage that's behind you.
Yeah.
And, good people do
Yeah.
bad things in the state of addiction. So it takes so much courage at a later age, because you've
Yeah.
hurt people along the way and
Yeah.
yourself. Whereas with somebody who's 16 or 17, yes, prevention. We need to get those young brains and bodies and meet them
Right.
where they
Right.
are. And really,
Yeah.
that's why it's actually wonderful to do this work, because it's fresh and new and exciting, and it's freeing. People feel free of shame in ways that they never have in those other models, because it's just your body doing
Yeah.
what it's designed to do. A key thing here to understand is that you cannot stay in either of those dysregulated states of flight, fight, or shutting down forever. You would die. In the sympathetic flight fight, your heart's pumping like crazy. It's way too metabolically taxing. You can't stay there. So the body naturally, instinctively, seeks behaviors that shut you down and release endogenous opioids that numb you.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
clever. Yes, it hurts you. It can hurt other people, but it's helping you to survive. And bodies don't care about morality when they're about survival. They just don't.
Yeah.
The prefrontal cortex goes to sleep. And then in the dorsal shutdown state, you can't stay there forever either, because the heart rate is lower than normal. And you can die there too. So the body will instinctively find high-risk behaviors or drugs and alcohol that shift you back up into flight-fight. Like cutting the body is a perfect example.
Right.
A perfect way of shifting states.
Yeah, that makes so much sense when you just said that. I think that's going to be incredibly helpful for a parent who's over here scratching their head, like, why is my kid doing these
That's why
crazy
they're
things?
doing them. I wrote that, really played that out a lot in my first book, which anybody could read. I mean, it's sort of pitched for clinicians, but if you're kind of a little nerdy about the theories and getting into it, it really, I just really traced that. Like, that was my mystery. It's like, what are these women doing? Oh, and
Right.
with cutting, it works both ways. So for some people, if they see the blood, it shifts them up into sympathetic from dorsal. They wake up, which they have to do because otherwise they die. And for
Yeah.
others, when they see the blood, it releases these endogenous opioids that numb you and put you to sleep. And it's the same with purging and binging. It's the same mechanism. Purging
Yeah.
and binging
Makes
also
sense.
releases these state shifts in the nervous system and brings a dissociation and numbness and also wakes the body up. So when we understand these crazy behaviors through that lens, they all start to make sense. It's like, my kid is just doing what any body does to keep it alive.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's why I asked about the adaptive versus
Yeah, it's
maladaptive,
the
because I
opposite.
think it's the opposite, and that made a lot of sense to me. I just wanted you to talk
Yeah.
about it because obviously you say it a lot better. Before I let you go, how would somebody find a therapist who works in this realm,
Yeah.
who understands what you're talking about in your
Yeah.
method? Like, how do we find
So,
somebody?
particularly in the addiction world, through my website, janwinhall.com, we've got
Okay.
a listing now of the Felt Sense Polyvagal Model facilitators who are located in internationally different parts of the world. And it's growing.
Okay.
As I keep training people, that list is growing. And then the other thing would be if people are struggling with more around depression or anxiety, but maybe not so much they're worried about problematic addictive behaviors. Lots of somatic therapists that are, if you just Google somatic therapists, there are going to be lots of people. The other person is a friend that I love her work, Ariel Schwartz. Do you know Ariel? Okay, because you should have her on. She
I do
she
not.
is an educational partner with Polyvagal Institute, like I am. And she is also a yoga teacher. And so she has these beautiful vagal toning practices that are wonderful for parents and they're wonderful for kids. I mean, we talked about adolescents, but if you have little kids, start them into this process before they get to this place.
Yes.
Have your kids doing yoga practice. Teach them breath work. The breath work is the fastest way into the nervous system. If you're in that sympathetic state, if you extenuate the exhalation breath, you activate the ventral vagus of safety. If you're in the dorsal shutdown state, if you activate the inhalation breath, you're activating sympathetic flight fight and moving from that immobilized state up to mobilization. So we work with this with all different dissociation, depression, anxiety, the borderline personality adaptation of the nervous system is simply an extreme dysregulation of arousal. Right?
Yeah.
And you see it happening. You can hardly make sense out of why or how, but it is that kind of extreme dysregulation. So
Yeah.
looking for the somatic
Amazing.
therapist, come and check out
Okay.
Polyvagal Institute. We do often
Yeah.
these somatic practices that are free to the general public. Yeah.
Okay. We will all be rushing there, I am sure, after listening to this. Thank you, Jan, so much. I could talk for days, but I know I have to let you go. So, if you had one word of encouragement for parents who might be in the thick of it
Mhm.
right now with a kid they don't
Yeah.
understand, what would you say to them?
I would say reach out. You know, it's so easy to get stuck with your child. Reach out. I've given you some ideas. Reach
Yeah,
out, do them, because you can get into a dorsal shutdown state too of hopelessness.
for
And
sure.
sometimes we have to borrow hope from other people.
Yeah. Oh, love it. Thank you so
That's
very
really my
much.
pleasure. Thanks for having me.